Now, in between my mom's passing and the memorial celebration of life service that we had for her, because it had been about 4 to 6 weeks since she had passed, that we waited to do our celebration of life for her. But the month up to then, there was so much that had to happen. And there's a list of everything you need to take care of. And when you look at the list, just for starters, it looks so overwhelming because there's so many things. And when I was trying to sit there and grieve for her in denial, and then one of the other stages of grief, anger, started to slip in because I was frustrated with the healthcare professionals that she had had for the last 7 years, that I feel kind of dropped the ball on her here at this stage of her life. I was angry that she wasn't willing to take better care of herself and eat better and exercise. And I was angry just at the world for taking her away from me. So dealing with those emotions and now having to make all these calls and deal with all these arrangements becomes really, really overwhelming. So once she had had the liver surgery, we sat down and made a list. She told me about bank accounts. She told me about which insurance policies she had out, who to call for her retirement, make sure I call Social Security, make sure I take care of the house, make sure anything else that needed to be done got done, and to know where everything was. Like the will is in the safe, make sure you can access everything. Knowing where all the important stuff was made it a little less of a headache when I had to start making phone calls and dealing with stuff. Many of the places that require a death certificate, like insurance companies and banks, different services, whether your loved one was part of a retirement account, they want to know and they want to see. But a lot of them, they went ahead and accepted like a copy. In many of the places that when you send a copy, I know a couple of them sent the copy back to us afterwards. So I didn't feel the need for any more than 8. And once it's recorded by a doctor, which my mother was in the hospital, so it was pretty immediate when she passed, and they call it time of death, they put everything in motion for a death certificate. And that was important because most stuff could not happen until we had that death certificate. And then it was a matter of what next. So I decided I was just going to take it a couple of things a day that I knew I could take care of. 2 of the biggest things they tell you to do immediately is call Social Security. My mom had direct deposit, so her Social Security checks kept dropping into her account. And I knew if I didn't call them immediately, they would keep coming in. Warning, you do not get to keep it if a check comes in after your loved one has passed. She passed, and people had told me, if you don't cancel this and they deposit it, then you've got to give that money back. So that's one more headache you're adding on to yourself after the fact. So I was like, okay, called Social Security, let them know. The thing was Social Security, because when the death was recorded at the hospital, it had already gone in the system. Like, yay for the internet and stuff being out there, also scary as hell. But they knew that she had passed, and because it was in the system, they looked it up and found the official, yes, this person is deceased and no longer with us. And so they went ahead and cut off her Social Security. So we had avoided that. The next thing is my mom was a retired nurse, so she had been getting retirement from the state of Virginia. So I immediately called them because it was exactly the same situation where the check was going to be deposited in her account, and I didn't want to have to keep track of what was coming and going, and especially because her account was to help pay for her memorial. and her services and her cremation and all of that. So I had notified them, and they had put that into effect. I had to go ahead and send them the death certificate and everything. And once that was taken care of, then it was the next phase, which was, let's think about what's going to happen to her property, because she had her home in Virginia. And the thing with my mother's bank accounts was that we were on it jointly, because when she started getting sick, she wanted to make sure things could still be paid for. And if I had to have access to pay a bill or something with her medical, that I could go ahead and do it. So that was an easy thing. And most banks just put a beneficiary down. So if there's a beneficiary listed on the bank account, it'll automatically roll over. We were on the account jointly, so I was able to access what I needed to. And then once she had passed, I just took in the death certificate and they took her name off the account. And a lot of the insurance policy people, too, same thing. There's a death beneficiary. So my mother had set that up. So there was a beneficiary on those accounts. And that was also something that just required the death certificate to be sent in. But that's a process. And that's the one thing I will say is compartmentalizing and trying to take things in little doses um, is going to be so much easier to handle, because no matter what, if you pull up any article or go onto any website and it says things you need to take care of when your loved one passes, it's overwhelming and it's really daunting because it's a lot of stuff. And I looked and just wanted to curl up in a ball and cry and just cry. And in some instances, I was just like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to have to do this. Because again, every step you take after they've passed is another step to not being able to be in denial and having to accept that they're no longer around and that they're not with you and just that they're gone. So you don't want to have to do everything. But for me, compartmentalizing it and taking it a little piece at a time is what got me through. And it's almost like every step you have to take in sending the death certificate and talking to people and letting them know that she passed, it's like stepping stones getting laid. And it's like every time it happens, it's solidifying more and more that your loved one isn't here anymore. And part of me in the process was wondering, how am I going to deal with when I get to the end of this? Hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell to stay up to date on all new videos.